So welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Jamie Lee. I'm a board member at the Maple Center. And so this afternoon, we're going to have Chloe talk about some functional medicine, nutrition. And first, I would like to thank our sponsors, the Gibson Foundation, the Fleshner Memorial Foundation, and Union Health. And thank all of you for coming. So we're going to listen to hear Chloe Hurst, and her title is 10 Healthy Habits to Promote Longevity.
All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Chloe, and let's just dive right into it. So, all right. So when I have the topic of 10 healthy habits to promote longevity, we kind of want to bring that back together to figure out what our actual focus is, right? So the definition of longevity is going to be a long life, right? Which we do want to live a long life, but also we want to be very healthy in that life, be very happy, cognitively strong, physically capable, and of course, energetic. So this portion is just as important in what I'm going to be tying into all of these things. So I kind of have longevity or prosperity, and I feel like that really brings all of those kinds of topics together here. So when we look at the state or the United States here, we kind of have this scale. On the very left-hand side of this color map, we see 74 years old, and on the very right side is 81 years old, which is that dark blue. And we see this mostly on the outsides of the United States, you know, California, New York, those kinds of places where they're really focused on health, right? Whereas when we look at Indiana, we're pretty light blue there, unfortunately. So that just goes to show we have a lot of work in terms of longevity. There's so many things that we need to be doing. So that's what my focus is here today. What is it lifestyle-wise that we are at a deficit in? So when we look at the causes of chronic disease, there's a ton. It's incredibly multifactorial. It depends on the individual, and it isn't just one thing that's going to change everything that leads to chronic disease. So I think that it's important to kind of get that in your mind, that it's incredibly important, the things that you are doing, but there isn't just one. So next up is what is causing aging. And really, once again, there's so many things, but one thing here that we can focus on is your telomere shortening. And when there's DNA damage as a result of your environment, the foods you're eating, inflammation, reactive oxidative species, all of these make your telomere shorten a little bit faster, which promotes aging. Okay, so there's so many things that you can do that's going to slow how quickly those telomeres shorten. Therefore, we're going to shorten the amount of damage that's going on in our cells, our DNA. So this slide is really eye-opening. Okay, that blue line and the green line, the blue line is comparable country average life expectancies. And those are like Australia, Belgium, Canada, France. All these places are comparable to the United States. And the green line is us. And we see that we started off kind of close together in the 80s, all right? But as time has gone on, we've all kind of gone up a little bit, but at a much slower rate. And something happened in 2004 all the way to 2020, where we dropped back down significantly, and we lost decades worth of progression in terms of longevity in our lifespan. So what is it that's making this an issue? So has anybody heard of the blue zones? Yeah, excellent. This is phenomenal research, and I'm spending a lot of the talk today focusing a little bit on this kind of stuff. So if you aren't familiar with the blue zones, it was a study done by Dan Buettner with National Geographic, and he started finding the places in the world where people lived to be the oldest and had the highest concentration of centenarians, people who are living over the age of 100 and still doing really well, right? Cognitively strong, very functional, all of those things. And they had the lowest incident of chronic disease. This is important here. So we see that it was Greece, Italy, Japan, Costa Rica, and even California here in the United States. That's the only place. And we kind of start looking at all of these different places and what do they have in common? What is different that they're doing that we are not doing in our everyday lives? And once again, there's a lot of stuff. So Dr. Dale Bredesen, if you've been hanging out with me and Dr. Steenstra very much, you've definitely heard us talk about this gentleman, and he has phenomenal research. And this is the cognitive piece that we want to talk about. So if you start having a decline in cognition as we get older, we kind of see that it keeps going steadily, getting worse over time. And that's that red line. That's with no treatment. With different drugs, it's progressing at a slower rate, but it's still getting worse. But with Recode, his research, he shows that you can improve that score in your cognition. And once again, his is very multidisciplinary. It's multifactorial. So these are the two research studies. On the left side, that's the blue zones. Those are the many different factors that are contributing to a long lifespan in those places. And on the right side is Dr. Bredesen's research looking at more than 7 different things that are incredibly important. So what I've done is I've taken those 2 objectives, right? The blue zones and the Bredesen protocol, and I looked at how they overlapped, okay? Because they have a lot of similarities. With the blue zones, it's a huge focus on tribe and having wine with your friends in the evening, interestingly enough. For the Bredesen protocol, it's detoxification and sleep and supplementation that are important. But together, the sense of purpose of what you're doing in your life, having a clear idea of where you're wanting to go, having a lot of movement, so you're not just sitting around and being sedentary, having a sense of belongingness, that kind of ties right in there with purpose. And then being plant strong. I'll elaborate on this a little bit more. And then caloric restriction. And this is kind of interesting. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that caloric restriction piece. So genetics versus epigenetics. We kind of get in the mindset that, and in recent data, they're showing, well, my genetics kind of show me that my parents didn't live very long. They had this chronic disease, but it's not a life sentence, right? They're showing that only about 20% of your DNA is what is contributing to longevity, okay? So there's a lot of room there that you have a ton of wiggle room in terms of creating a lifestyle that's going to project you in health along your lifespan, all right? You are absolutely in the driver's seat here. So this epigenetics piece is incredibly important. This is what you're doing every single day that is helping to express or silence your genes, right? So every single food that you eat, every single deep breath that you take to calm yourself down, every exercise you do plays a role in your DNA expression. And that right there is really powerful, right? It puts you in the driver's seat once again in your health. So I love this image. I love it. I think it's so interesting and it's really profound, right? So what we're seeing is this evolutionary kind of movement, but then we get to the far right side, and this is what modern man looks like. And it's a result of everything, really. It's our lifestyles, it's our hormones that are being affected by the foods that we're eating, the lack of exercise that we're having in our lives, and it is playing a substantial role. In 2004, we saw that huge drop in our longevity. What is playing that huge role? So Dr. Pradeep, I don't know if any of you have heard of him, but he's one of the top cardiologists in the United States. And he gives a ton of really wonderful seminars on YouTube. And something that he always kind of states is this keeping up with my genetics? Okay. And so we are Paleolithic beings, generated genetics of 2.5 million years old. Okay. So 12,000 years ago, we started agriculture. And then we're in an agricultural society with a Paleolithic diet, okay? Kind of interesting. So we had a little bit of a shift. And then 200 years ago, we industrialized, okay? So we changed our food again, and it became very incredibly processed. And then in 1818, the steel mill was invented. And that changes your food again. We get a lot of simple carbohydrates, a lot of simple sugars, and these take over our diets, right? It's the thing that is the most easily accessible, and we have at most stores. If you look at anything with a label on it, it's going to have the flour in there, right? We are exposed to these kinds of things constantly, simple carbohydrates, and they are impacting us in our genetics. So how can we take our health into our own hands and promote longevity and prosperity? Well, with these guys right here, and we can break it down so that it doesn't have to be super incredibly hard. We can do it every single day. So the first thing that's most important is reducing the added sugars from your diet. And I really want to emphasize that, the added sugars. There's sugar and carbohydrates in most things, but when it's stripped down to a very concentrated form and added kinds of things, that's really impacting us. And that's even the high fructose corn syrup, the corn syrup, all of those things. So this graph is interesting. The blue line is diabetes mortality. What we see, I need my drink, in 1950, where there was World War I, right around that range with that black block, there was food rationing. And there wasn't as much access to sugar and those kinds of foods. They were doing a caloric restriction, right? So we also see sugar consumption drop down really quickly. Diabetes mortality followed, okay? After the war, we kind of started up with that sugar consumption once again. Diabetes followed. Same thing happened again, World War II, that second black line. That is interesting, right? So obviously this isn't causational, but certainly very correlated. Okay, so next up, how did insulin levels get so high? How did our hormones start reacting in this certain way? Well, in 1977, the average amount of sugar intake in a day was 57 grams. Okay, now it's over 120 grams in a day. And that isn't too hard to get to, right? That Coke on the left side, it has 37 to 40 grams of sugar in it right there. 20 grams in that Chobani. There's 20 to 30 grams in that Starbucks. And the sweet tea, that's up in the 50-gram range right there, okay? So you have to be incredibly intentional about the things that you're putting in your diet every single day, because that adds up so insanely quickly. So ancestral eating style, all right? This is kind of what Dr. Pradeep was talking about, right? We want to eat for our genetics, okay? And so fasting 12 to 14 hours a day, every single day, is something that you should absolutely implement into your life. This is because we are not used to having a steady stream of glucose in our bloodstream, right? This is when we get insulin resistance. Our body does not want any more. So when we kind of break up how much we're being exposed to these kinds of foods, then our cells are going to be a little bit more insulin sensitive, right? So it takes at least 10 hours for your body to finish digesting a meal entirely. Okay, we get a few extra hours in there to do a little bit of healing and reducing inflammation. 12 to 14 hours a day, absolutely every single day. And once a week, you could even do a little bit of a longer fast. Maybe skip breakfast if that feels right for you. Skip dinner if that feels right to you. There are so many incredible benefits that I can go a little bit deeper into with a longer fasting period if you're able to implement that regularly into your diet. The 20-hour fast, just going 6 p.m. to 3 p.m. If you're doing this one time a week, you get a 9-fold increase in brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And what that does is that is going to help with neuroplasticity. Dr. Jones was talking about that not too long ago, helping with your cognition, helping with your memory and your learning styles. When you are eating, food is going to bind to that growth hormone and turn it off. What does that mean? It means that you are not putting on any lean muscle mass when you are also digesting. So this is why it's also so incredibly important to have a amount of time between your meals so that your body can catch up. It can rebuild that muscle and strengthen you. So fasting is the cheapest, right? The absolute cheapest and most effective thing that you can do for your health. It increases growth hormone secretion, adding the lean muscle when you're breaking your fast. decreasing the insulin secretion, which also increases your sensitivity. That's amazing. Induces autophagy. And this is important. So when we're going through metabolism, our body's going to have byproducts, and it might leave some little organelles in your cells. But when we're going an extended period of time without food, a source of energy, our body gets really efficient. It says, okay, I'm going to go pick up my clothes that are cluttering up the house. I'm going to put them together, then I can get around a bit easier, right? So that's what it's doing. It's cleaning house with those cells, and it's with those organelles, and it's recycling. And then it's also reducing the inflammation and lengthening telomeres right there, anti-aging properties. So what if I am hungry all of the time? Well, yeah, I get it. I get it. I am an endurance athlete and I feel hungry all of the time. But what we know is these studies is 3 days of fasting, okay? And as you would think that if you go 3 days fasting, you are going to be absolutely starving. But this image right here, we see that on the 3rd day, they produce less ghrelin hormone, which is the hormone that your body tells you that you are hungry. So over time, this is going to reduce your appetite, and you're going to be satisfied a little bit quicker and be able to lengthen that fasting time altogether. So it's something that you can train yourself to do. Also, your body anticipates meal time based upon your circadian rhythm. So that's what that top image is. So at lunch, dinner, and breakfast, you see a little bit of a spike. But if you have breakfast at 8 a.m. one day and 10 a.m. the next day, the following day, your body's going to produce those kinds of hunger hormones around 9, right? It's going to quickly adapt and change based on the environment that it is in. Okay, so metabolic flexibility. I love this term. It is phenomenal. So way back when, we were able to quickly transition from burning carbohydrates, using glucose, and using fat for fuel. Over time, we have not exposed ourselves to long times of fasting. So, and we constantly had instant gratification via constant access to food. So we got stuck on this side of the scale, only using carbs and having glucose at all points in time. So we're not able to switch between the two systems very easily. So when we are having these long fasting periods and reducing the amount of glucose that is constantly in our bloodstream, we are able to improve our metabolic flexibility, which is incredibly powerful. And worth noting is fat is a much more efficient burn for your body. It's going to have a lot less byproducts, and it's also going to be anti-inflammatory. So fasting and feasting is what we were definitely designed for. I mentioned a second ago, it takes 10 hours to completely digest a meal. And if you have a meal, say at 5 o'clock, and then you eat again at 6 o'clock, your body didn't get to finish that cascade. And there are bacteria in your gut that can't have the regular food. They can't. They can only have the byproducts and the tertiary byproducts. So if you don't let that cascade completely finish, they're not going to be fed. So that reduces the amount of variety of microbes that are present in your gut. And we definitely know that a healthy gut microbiome is going to be a healthier individual. So I love this imagery too. All right, Hara Hachi Bu is something that they really promote in the blue zones, okay? And that just means eat until you're 80% full, okay? And so we see our stomach here. We see the stomach acid, about 80% filled up right there. And we look at a peanut butter jar, okay? If I were to take a peanut butter jar and I were to fill it all the way up with water and then start shaking it to try to clear out the peanut butter that's in there, not much is going to happen, right? There's not much movement that's able to occur because it's filled all the way up. But if you fill it up only 80%, there's a lot more room to shake that water in that peanut butter jar, okay? So that's what's happening in your stomach. If you are eating until you are completely full, your stomach can't do all of the movement that it needs to do to efficiently digest and absorb your food properly. So if you follow Hara Hachi Bu, you can. You absolutely can. It allows your body to have a much more efficient digestion. All right, so promoting a healthy gut. I can talk about this absolutely all day, but the most important thing that you can do is incorporate some form of probiotic into your diet. And probiotics are things that have active bacterial cultures in them, which is going to be fermented foods. If you can have 1 to 2 forms a day, that is going to be phenomenal for increasing the variety that is in your gut microbiome. Every type of food, every type of fermented food has its own strains, and the more that we can bring into the gut, the better. Also, the darker the fruit or the vegetable, that means it has a whole lot of phytonutrients in it, and those are also incredibly powerful. So incorporating those are going to do a lot of good for your gut. Okay, the gut microbiome. So dysbiosis leads to the inflammatory process. And we know that inflammation is a big key player in a lot of these chronic diseases. So if we can reduce inflammation via having a healthy gut microbiome, we are much less likely to have some of these issues that are going on. And lipopolysaccharides, just a quick little addition here, is a toxin that is produced by bacteria in your gut. And there's kind of this constant role play. I'll go to this slide, because you have healthy microbes that are in your gut and you have unhealthy microbes, and they live symbiotically, kind of like a clownfish and an anemone, right? They're happy. There's a good balance, but it can be offset, and that's what can happen with the bad bacteria. It can leach out this lipopolysaccharide, induce inflammation, which is found in people with obesity, metabolic disorder, and diabetic patients. So a healthy gut protocol. You can wake up in the morning, scrape your tongue or oil pull with coconut oil, or rinse your mouth. Overnight, your body was detoxifying and it accumulated bacteria in your mouth. And what do most of us do when we wake up? We wake up and then we eat and then we brush our teeth. All that time that your body spent detoxifying ended up on your tongue, and you took it right back into your gut, right? So it is so important. Scrape your tongue, do any of those things. Those are all Ayurvedic techniques, and they are so powerful and important. The next thing is break your fast with whole foods that like fruits or vegetables, any of those kinds of things. Lots of plants and variety, and plenty of water. Once again, fermented foods at least once a day, any form that you like or is very satisfying for you. And eliminate the things that are wreaking havoc on your gut, which are alcohol, sugars, artificial sweeteners, fried foods, and processed foods. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about plant strong eating, but there is a big spectrum across the board of eating styles. On one side is the highly inflammatory diet that the average American eats. And on the right side is a whole foods plant-based diet, which is anti-inflammatory and reverses chronic disease. This is very proven. A lot of us don't have to be on the far right of the spectrum, but we can sprinkle ourselves somewhere in the middle. And it's important to have an idea of where you sit currently and where you have room to grow. All right, so a question that is often asked is, but what about the protein? And there's no protein if I don't have any animal protein. And that's really not true. If we look at this buffalo, he is filled with all kinds of lean body mass, right? And he gets his diet from grass. So that's not true by any means. And the blue zones, those places where the people live to be the oldest, their diets are 80 to 100% plant-based. And they have meat on average 3 times each month. So really everything in moderation, I think, is kind of the best way to approach that. We know that red meat induces oxidation from the heme iron. It has exogenous hormones that we're bringing into our body, and it contains heterocyclic amines, which contribute to cancer. So we want to stay away from those kinds of things when we can. The World Health Organization actually classified red meat as a carcinogen and processed meat as a group 1 carcinogen. That was back in 2015. Studies show that vegetarian men and women live 7 years longer and 4 years longer than their non-vegetarian counterparts. So this data, it's pretty profound, truly. Michael Pollan kind of said it best: eat food, mostly plants, not too much. All right, so sitting is the new smoking. A sedentary lifestyle is causing major issues. And The effects of just 45 minutes of exercise raises your metabolic rate for up to 14 hours post-exercise. So what's a better reason to exercise, truly? And that can correlate to about 190 extra calories in a day that are burned just from one exercise session. And we look at high intensity exercise, that produces even more of that brain-derived neurotrophic factor to levels that are higher than a 20-hour fast, right? So when we look at that graph, that's what we see is right here. Your BDNF increases up to 250% from the baseline. So once again, neuroplasticity, increasing our memory and our learning, that is phenomenal with just a little bit of exercise. And aerobic exercise slows the decline in telomere length, once again, and in just a 6-month period that can occur. It reduces oxidative stress, which contributes to DNA damage, and increases antioxidant activity. So the power of exercise on glucose, if you need just one more positive thing, is if you were to go on a walk just for 10 minutes after eating a meal, it drops your blood glucose down significantly. This is an example of that. We see a little poke bowl, which is incredibly healthy. We have some avocado in there and some rice. We get a huge spike in our blood sugar. But if you go on a walk immediately for just 10 minutes, it's minimal. It's incredibly minimal. So this is powerful with blood glucose levels in your A1C if you're wanting to reduce that over time. So stress yourself out. This is the absolute opposite of what everyone else has told you to do today, but only a little bit and not chronically. And that's because your body handles stress a little bit better when you are conditioning it to, right? So that's the same as your exercise. That's the same as your cold plunges. This fasting, that's a stressor on your body. If you're sauning or you're out in the cold weather without a jacket on, I know my mom would kill me if I did that. But what it does is it's exposing yourself to these elements and it's making you be more resilient, which is what we need. Yeah. And then sleep. You need to sleep at least 7 to 9 hours a night. Absolutely. It sounds like very elementary to tell you this, but you need to prioritize this and have your last meal 3 hours before bed. The reason for that is because it's just going to help you sleep a little bit better at night. If you sleep less than 7 hours, it increases that lipopolysaccharide, which is the toxin in your bloodstream, which we want to reduce. It takes at least 7 hours for your microbiome or the lining in your microbiome to be repaired. So we need to have at least 7 hours right there again. This is also when our body does cellular cleanup, all of the toxins that are in our body. This is passive, requires no extra work. So sleep at least 7 to 9 hours. Caffeine, don't have it after 1 p.m. This is going to impact the quality of your sleep. Same with that blue light. If you could put on some little lenses, that'd be incredibly powerful. And then meditation and mindfulness. If you can meditate at least 5 times a day, even just putting your hand on your belly and allowing your belly to fully expand, this is going to decrease your blood pressure, especially if you're breathing through your nose, because that increases how much nitric oxide you're taking in, which also decreases your blood pressure. So these are very, very simple things that you can do every single day and have a very profound impact on your health. And then prioritizing your social life. We know that we are social creatures. Prioritize this. Find some friends, hang out with them, have a book club, any of those things. And then lastly, ikigai is kind of the last thing of that blue zone kind of topic. So this is where you find what you love, find what the world needs, find what you can be paid for, and find what you're good at. And when you can combine all of those things, that's your ikigai, that's your life purpose, and that's what's going to be so incredibly powerful for your longevity. So to review everything and put it back together, we see an active lifestyle is number 1, plant strong eating, social circle, periods of fasting and caloric restriction, meditation, a healthy gut microbiome, having your purpose in ikigai, optimal sleeping, stress management, and mental stimulation. And I must remind you, life is merely a string of habits. Choose your habits wisely if you wish to impact your life greatly. So we think that stress, oh no, there we go. We think that success looks like a very narrow line that is just going straight forward, but really there's a lot of loops and curves in there. So be very mindful of this, and be gentle on yourselves as you are making these habit changes, because they are challenging. You will fall off the wagon, and the most important thing is getting back up onto it. So I don't know what's happening to this, but I would be happy to take any questions, and thank you. Yes. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely understand. I think I'm just gonna have to try to project my voice. So the question was, what if I really like eating before bed and I feel like I sleep much better? I am never going to discount you listening to your body. And I think that if you know that about yourself and you know that you are doing well with that, then that's just fine. Absolutely. It once again, if you can take all of these habits and put them together so that it fits your lifestyle, that's going to be the most serving for you. Yeah. Yes.
That you notice one of the things there you mentioned the different cultures and how aging has been related to some cultures, some countries, etc.
Yes.
But one of the things you mentioned, for example, is the habit in the US.
Yes.
What happens here in general, I believe, people eat late when
Yes.
they return from work.
Yep.
And in the cold weather or whichever weather,
Yep.
they stay home. They don't go out anymore.
Right.
Contrary to that, in most cultures, you eat midday.
Right.
Heavy meal is midday.
Yeah.
Next, you take naps.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You take a wine. You take whatever. So then we, in general, are doing the opposite.
Right.
In this culture versus others that you mentioned now. Are there any studies that are done reversing this pattern in the US? Because as we all know, the amount of people who are getting fatter, bigger, more bad habits, alcoholism, whatever, is increasing.
Right.
Versus what the trend is and the statistics are telling you.
Absolutely. That is a wonderful question and statement. So what she had asked was, in these other cultures, they have the meal at midday. When the sun is the highest, your digestive fire is the strongest. And then they're having their snack after, or they're having a nap after that, and then a smaller meal in the evening time. In the States, we do the opposite of that. We have a small meal at lunch and a huge meal at dinner time. I don't know of any studies where they have tried to swap that and seen how that helps. The issue with diet and lifestyle and doing studies on these kinds of things is it's really challenging to do a long-term study when you're modifying somebody's diet and expecting them to keep doing it again and again and again and repeating it so that you can publish that. So I'm not sure. That's certainly worth looking into. Absolutely. Yes.
My time is divided between Caribbean, Europe, and US.
Yeah.
And I have always observed my home country, Dominican Republic, heavy meal is midday.
Yep.
It was before. Nowadays, when everybody works outside, the young generation cannot come home.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Because of traffic or whatever. Same is happening in Europe now. The trend is reversing.
Yes. Yes.
Because parents can do that, but the young people cannot.
Right.
So you see, there's a lot of things that we need approach and so
absolutely
to do that. Centers like you guys.
Yep. And I'm really happy that you brought that up. When they kept looking at the blue zones, and they started looking at the younger generations in those places where the older generations were living the longest, the younger generations have adopted Western lifestyles. They've started eating a lot more fast food as they have moved into their countries, and they are no longer having these wonderful low rates of chronic disease. So, I mean, we can absolutely tell when our trends are going over there, they're no longer doing as well. Yeah. Thank you for that. That was great. Any other questions, comments? I know you said you had a couple.
I'd love to know more about, this might be a controversial question because I have other doctors who say that there's no evidence of gut microbiome.
Uh-huh.
So could you explain to me what the evidence differences, so I have evidence.
Yeah, yeah. I have some interesting slides that I could potentially show you maybe after this. And they look at all kinds of different diets, okay? And they look at somebody who has a Western diet, somebody who eats plant-based, ketogenic, and they see that when we look at those microbiomes of those particular diets, there's some that have very incredibly inflamed guts. And there are some who have leaky guts and that lipopolysaccharide that's floating around as an issue. And in the plant-based diets, the ones that are a low FODMAP, they do not have that issue. So there is so much evidence on the gut microbiome, the connection between the gut-brain axis. And in the past 2 or 3 years, there have been study after study reporting that kind of topic and giving tons of evidence. So it is widely known today, I would say. Yes. Yeah.
For example, in my home country, anytime you peel a pineapple, for example, the skin is never thrown out.
Oh, yeah.
The skin is put in water
Uh-huh.
so that it can ferment.
Yeah.
And that is what you take as juice.
Uh-huh.
And there are 6 or 7 proteins that I know of that
Uh-huh.
we do that automatically. And everybody is drinking that,
Yeah.
including something that is called mabi, which is a fermented vine.
Okay.
They put in big stuff, and that's what you have for refreshment without sugar.
Uh-huh.
And if any sugar is black sugar.
Okay.
So it's a constant system. And I don't remember ever. And I had grandparents who passed at over 100. Anyone saying about gut problems.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I know what you're saying. Yes. Yes. And the gut microbiome has been a topic of interest in Ayurveda for thousands of years. You know, we know that the gut microbiome is incredibly powerful because that is where digestion occurs. That's what's powering us. So if you have a healthy gut, once again, you're going to have a healthier body. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? No? Thank you.